Imagine a fog-shrouded night in 1844 Charleston, where five powerful men, lords of cotton empires built on broken souls, step into a locked room, their hearts heavy with unspoken sins. As the door seals shut, an unseen force stirs, whispering of judgment from the heavens. In moments, they're gone, vanished like smoke from their still-burning cigars, leaving only a carved warning, reckoning. But was it human vengeance, or the hand of God exacting payment for the chains they forged? Tonight, we descend into the abyss of guilt and mystery that swallowed them whole. In the heart of Antebellum, South Carolina, where the humid air clings like a shroud and the Spanish moss drapes from ancient oaks like spectral veils, Charleston stood as a bastion of opulence and oppression. The year was 1844, a time when the city's cobblestone streets whispered tales of prosperity stained by the blood and sweat of the enslaved. The soil here was rich, not just with cotton, but with secrets, buried grievances that festered like wounds untreated, waiting for the day when divine justice might rise from the earth itself. It was a city where the Bible was quoted in parlors to justify chains, yet the same scriptures haunted the consciences of those who wielded the whip. Themes of sin and redemption echoed in the sermons of St. Michael's Church, where the elite knelt on Sundays, their prayers laced with hypocrisy. But on October 23, something biblical unfolded, a vanishing that felt less like a crime and more like a parable of retribution, where the proud are brought low, and the hidden sins are laid bare. The summons arrived like a ghost in the mail, slipping into the lives of five men who believed themselves untouchable. Each envelope was a masterpiece of subtlety, heavy cream parchment, imported from the mills of Europe, sealed with crimson wax embossed by an anchor entwined with cotton bolls, a symbol that evoked both the maritime trade that fueled their wealth and the heavy chains that bound their laborers. No sender's name, no flourish of courtesy. Just stark words, a matter of utmost urgency demands your presence. October 23, 8 p.m. The Wellington Club, Private Chamber 3. Attendance imperative. Destroy this upon reading. Picture Colonel James Hartley first, a man forged in the fires of the War of 1812, now 62, his face etched with lines like the furrows in his vast fields. He sat at his breakfast table in a grand dining room, overlooking the Ashley River, where the morning sun filtered through lace curtains, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. The air smelled of fresh biscuits and strong coffee, but as he cracked the seal, a chill seeped in, unrelated to the autumn breeze. His plantations spanned 3 counties, home to nearly 800 souls whose every breath was owned by him. Hartley had seen battlefields soaked in blood, yet this anonymous card stirred a deeper dread, a spiritual unease, as if it were a summons from the Almighty himself, calling him to account for the ledger of lives he'd commodified. He turned the card in his calloused hands, the paper smooth against his skin, and instead of burning it, he tucked it into his vest pocket, where it burned against his chest like a brand of guilt. That night, as he lay in his four-poster bed, the canopy above him seeming to close in like a coffin lid, he whispered verses from Psalm 94, "O Lord, God of vengeance, O God of vengeance, shine forth." Sleep evaded him, replaced by visions of shadowed figures in his fields, their eyes accusatory. Across town, in a study lined with mahogany bookshelves groaning under the weight of ledgers and legal tomes, Thomas Brennan, 38 and hungry for more, received his missive. The room was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, its flame flickering like a nervous heartbeat, casting elongated shadows on the walls adorned with maps of trade routes to England. Brennan was the innovator among them, his single plantation a model of efficiency, where new gins processed cotton faster than ever, turning human toil into gold. But ambition is a double-edged sword, sharp with pride and sin. As he read the words, his fingers tightened on the card, the wax seal crumbling under his thumb. Anonymity in Charleston was a myth, everyone knew everyone's secrets, or so he thought. This breach unsettled him, evoking the parable of the rich fool and Luke, who built bigger barns only to face sudden reckoning. He didn't burn it either. Instead, he paced the room, the floorboards creaking under his boots, his mind racing through suspects. By evening, he'd slipped a derringer into his coat, a small, cold weight against his side, a futile talisman against whatever spiritual storm brewed. His wife, Eliza, noticed the change, his eyes darting to the darkened windows, as if expecting the gaze of an avenging angel. She asked, her voice soft in the candlelight, but he brushed her off, though inside, a seed of fear took root, watered by the guilt of prophets reaped from suffering. Then there was Richard Ashby, 45, the meticulous chronicler, whose 2 plantations were run like clockwork, every birth, death, and lash recorded in leather-bound volumes stacked in his library like silent witnesses. His home overlooked the harbor, where ships bobbed like omens on the water, their sails furled against the gathering dusk. The invitation arrived as he balanced his accounts, the quill scratching across paper with rhythmic precision. The unfamiliar seal, a fusion of anchor and cotton, jarred him. He knew every insignia in the Lowcountry, from family crests to merchant marks. This was an anomaly, a crack in the facade of control. Ashby was a man who wrestled with his conscience in private, his journals hinting at doubts. What price the soul for this earthly gain? Biblical echoes of Matthew 16 verse 26 haunted him. What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? He spent hours examining the card under a magnifying glass, the lens revealing the fine weave of the paper, imported and rare. No destruction for him. Instead, he added it to his collection of curiosities, but that night, as thunder rumbled distantly like divine disapproval, he felt a spiritual weight pressing down, as if the invitation were a harbinger of judgment for the sins documented in his own hand. William Foster, 51, carried the weight of legacy on his broad shoulders. His family had rooted in Charleston soil for 3 generations, their mansion on Battery Street a testament to enduring wealth, its verandas offering views of Fort Sumter rising like a sentinel in the bay. Foster was seen as progressive, allowing enslaved families to stay together, providing rudimentary education, but it was a veneer over the core rot of exploitation. His private journals, hidden in a locked drawer, revealed a soul in torment, entries pondering Proverbs 21 verse 1, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord, he turns it wherever he will." Did that include the hearts of slaveholders? The invitation found him in his garden, amid blooming camellias whose petals fell like tears. He read it slowly, the words sinking in like lead, stirring a profound unease, a fear not just of earthly intrigue, but of cosmic accountability. That afternoon, he sought solace in the family church, the pews empty save for shafts of stained glass light painting the floor in hues of redemption's blood. The rector noted his pallor, the way Foster knelt, head bowed, lips moving in silent plea. For what forgiveness? The chains he perpetuated, the lives bent to his will? He left the card intact, a reminder of impending doom. The youngest, Marcus Landry, 33, was still green in the ways of power, having inherited his father's estate just 2 years prior. His plantation house, perched on a bluff above rice fields that stretched like a sea of green sorrow, felt too vast for him, its halls echoing with the ghosts of decisions past. The invitation arrived as he reviewed crop yields, the numbers blurring before his eyes. Nervousness defined him, a constant worry that one misstep would topple him from the elite's perch. The anonymous command amplified this, evoking Job's trials, where wealth vanishes in an instant under divine scrutiny. He paced his veranda, the wooden planks groaning, the air thick with the scent of marsh and decay. That morning, he penned a letter to his sister, sealing it with trembling hands, "If I do not return, know that shadows have claimed me, pray for my soul." He instructed his staff to hold it, but fate, or providence, would see it vanish later, as if erased by an unseen hand. Over the 9 days leading to the fateful night, suspicion festered like an untreated wound. Each man probed their networks discreetly, whispers in smoke-filled parlors, inquiries at social gatherings where crystal glasses clinked like judgments. Hartley consulted old military contacts, Brennan analyzed the wax with a chemist, finding it laced with rare resins from the Indies. Ashby cross-referenced seals in his archives, Foster pondered in prayer, and Landry fretted alone. The paper was confirmed as fine Belgian stock, recently docked, clues that pointed nowhere, heightening the dread. Biblical parallels mounted in their minds, the writing on the wall in Daniel, foretelling downfall. Guilt simmered beneath, the knowledge that their empires rested on stolen lives, souls crying out for justice as in Exodus. As October 23 dawned, a fog descended upon Charleston like a biblical plague, thick and impenetrable, muffling the cries of gulls and the toll of church bells. It rolled in from the harbor, where ships loomed like phantoms, their masts piercing the gray veil. The air tasted of salt and foreboding, visibility reduced to arm's length, forcing carriages to crawl through streets that felt alive with unseen eyes. Locals murmured of omens, the fog unnatural for fall, perhaps a sign from above, veiling the city for its reckoning. The Wellington Club on Meeting Street was a fortress of privilege, its facade of stucco and iron balconies hiding interiors of polished luxury. Private Chamber 3, upstairs, was a sanctum, windowless, walls draped in crimson velvet that absorbed sound like sins confessed. The mahogany door locked only from within, its brass mechanism gleaming like a false promise of security. No vents, no secrets passages, just solid oak floors and a plastered ceiling, unyielding. That morning, signs of unrest emerged. Hartley breakfasted distractedly, his wife's concerned gaze following him as he checked locks obsessively, murmuring about debts unpaid. Brennan armed himself, his pistol's cold steel a poor shield against spiritual assault. Ashby burned select papers in his fireplace, flames devouring records of transactions too dark to face, whispers of sales that tore families apart. Smoke curled upward like prayers of contrition. Foster lingered in church, the cool stone beneath his knees, seeking absolution he knew he hadn't earned. Landry's letter vanished from his desk, as if plucked by divine intervention. By evening, the fog intensified, street lamps blooming feeble auras in the murk. Horses snorted nervously, hooves clipping on cobblestones slick with mist. The club's doorman, Henry Webb, a free man of color whose keen eyes missed nothing, logged arrivals in his ledger, ink flowing steadily. Colonel Hartley first, at 7:47 p.m., cloak dripping fog, eyes scanning shadows as if pursued by ghosts of the oppressed. He ascended without pause, boots thudding on stairs carpeted in plush red. Brennan at 7:52, pausing outside to glance back, Webb noted a murmur, as if addressing an invisible companion, perhaps his conscience. Ashby at 7:55, clutching a portfolio like a shield, refusing Webb's aid, his grip white-knuckled. Foster at 7:58, inquiring of the others, relief flickering in his eyes like a candle in wind. Landry last, 8:01, pale as parchment, querying unusual loiterers, fear etching his youthful face. 5 entered, ascending to chamber 3. At 8:03, the lock engaged with a resonant click, sealing them in. The club hummed with subdued activity, 11 members scattered, sipping brandy by fireplaces crackling with warmth. From 8:15, voices drifted from the chamber, low, urgent, a cadence of debate laced with tension. Manager Edmund Price passed at 8:30, noting intensity, words indistinct but charged, like a confessional boiling over. Then, at 9:17, silence crashed down, profound, unnatural, as if the room had been vacuumed of life. Judge Harrison in the library felt it, the quiet amplifying his pulse, a void where sound should be. By 10:45, concern mounted. Webb knocked, no reply. Louder, calling names, silence. Price joined, pounding, light seeping under the door like false hope. At 11:03, locksmith Jonathan Miller summoned, arriving 11:34, tools clinking. The lock, engaged internally, yielded at 11:52. Price swung the door open to emptiness. Lamps burned steadily, flames steady in glass chimneys, illuminating a tableau frozen in time. Chairs shoved back haphazardly, as if risen in haste. Brandy glasses half full, amber liquid undisturbed. Cigars in ashtrays, for ashen stubs, but hardly smoldering, smoke coiling lazily, a fresh light, impossible after 3 hours locked. The window, latched, painted shut, layers intact. Walls unbreached, floor solid, ceiling pristine. No escape. Yet carved into the table, gouged with frantic force, wood shavings fresh, was reckoning. Below, obliterated numbers, scratched over like forbidden truths. Encircling, tally marks, hundreds, each a stroke for a soul wronged? A ledger of sins? Price paled, Webb felt the air thicken, wrongness palpable, like entering a tomb post-desecration. Nothing amiss, yet everything screamed absence. Authorities alerted, Chief Constable Daniel Rutherford arrived by 12:30 a.m., officers in tow. Methodical, he catalogued, room dimensions, no anomalies. Key in lock, inside. Cigars analyzed, Hartley's recent. Brandy pure. Carvings fresh. Effects left, Hartley's watch ticking remorselessly. Brennan's gloves, supple leather. Ashby's portfolio, mundane records, yet hinting at deeper ledgers. The vanishing echoed biblical vanishings, Enoch taken, or the wicked swept away in Noah's flood. Was this divine retribution for the sin of slavery, a spiritual erasure? The fog outside lifted slowly, as if the city exhaled, but the chill lingered, a haunting legacy of justice unmet or just begun. As dawn broke over Charleston on October 24, 1844, the fog that had cloaked the city like a funeral shroud began to lift, revealing a world forever altered. The air still carried the metallic tang of harbor salt, mingled with the acrid smoke from chimneys where families huddled in fear. Church bells tolled mournfully from St. Philip's steeple, their peals echoing like judgments from on high, reminding the faithful of Proverbs 28 verse 13, "Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy." But for the 5 vanished plantation owners, mercy seemed a distant dream, their disappearance a parable of hidden sins bubbling to the surface like poison from a well. Constable Daniel Rutherford, a man of iron resolve with a face weathered by years of chasing shadows in the Lowcountry's underbelly, stood in the Wellington Club's private chamber 3, the room now cordoned off with ropes like a sacred or cursed site. The carved word reckoning stared back at him from the mahogany table, its gouges deep and raw, as if clawed by talons rather than a knife. Tally marks surrounded it, hundreds etched in frantic clusters, each one perhaps a soul's cry for justice, evoking the biblical census of sins in the Book of Life. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence, the lamp's flames flickering as if disturbed by breaths from beyond. Rutherford's officers had documented every inch, the pushed-back chairs, their leather seats still warm to the touch hours later, the brandy glasses with fingerprints smudged in the condensation, the cigars, for reduced to grey ash like spent lives, but Colonel Hartley's still curling smoke, a spectral signal that defied logic. How could a cigar smolder fresh after hours of absence? It whispered of the impossible, of time bent or spirits lingering, a modern echo of the burning bush that spoke to Moses. Rutherford began his interrogations methodically, his voice steady but his eyes sharp, piercing the veil of Charleston's polite facades. The 11 club members present that night were rounded up in the main parlor, where crystal decanters gleamed under chandelier light, casting prism rainbows on walls papered in damask silk. They were men of means, merchants, lawyers, judges, their cravats perfectly tied, but their faces etched with unease, as if the vanishing had cracked the illusion of their invincibility. Judge Theodore Harrison, his white beard trembling slightly, recounted the unnatural silence at 9:17 p.m., how it descended like a pall, making the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall resound like a heartbeat in a tomb. It was as if the world held its breath, he whispered, his hands clasped tight, perhaps in unspoken prayer. The staff, Henry Webb, the doorman, with his ledger clutched like a shield, Edmund Price, the manager, his uniform rumpled from the night's chaos, and the 2 servers echoed the tale, no unusual sounds after the voices ceased, no footsteps on the creaking stairs, no shadows slipping through the fog outside. The locksmith, Jonathan Miller, a burly man with calloused hands scarred from years of prying secrets from metal, swore the lock was engaged from within, the mechanism untouched by tampering. No man could slip out without a key or a miracle, he grunted, crossing himself subtly, his Catholic faith stirring images of saints vanishing in divine rapture or demons dragging sinners to the depths. But the room held more clues, personal talismans left behind like offerings on an altar of abandonment. William Foster's walking stick, carved from ebony with a silver handle engraved with his initials, leaned against the velvet-draped wall, its tip worn from years of authoritative strides across plantation grounds. Marcus Landry's hat, a fine beaver felt with a silk band, hung on the brass coat rack by the door, its brim still dusted with the evening's fog. Men of their station didn't abandon such items lightly, they were extensions of their pride, symbols of status in a society built on hierarchies of power and possession. To leave them was to shed earthly bonds, evoking the biblical command in Matthew 19 verse 21, "If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess, and come, follow me." Had these men been called or compelled to a higher or lower reckoning? With no answers in the club, Rutherford dispatched officers to the homes of the missing, their horses' hooves clattering on cobblestones slick with morning dew, the city awakening to rumors that spread like wildfire through market squares and slave quarters alike. Whispers among the enslaved carried a different tone, hopeful, perhaps, that the master's sins had finally caught up, a fulfillment of the promise in Galatians 6 verse 7, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap." At Colonel James Hartley's grand residence on East Bay Street, where wrought iron balconies overlooked the harbor's restless waves, officers were met by his wife, Eleanor, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night, her lace cap askew. She led them through halls lined with portraits of stern ancestors, their painted gazes judgmental, to the study, a sanctum of leather-bound books and maps of conquered lands. But chaos reigned, shelves ransacked, volumes tumbled to the Persian rug in heaps, papers strewn across the oak desk like fallen leaves in a storm. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her throat. She swore the room had been immaculate that afternoon, the colonel fastidious as a drill sergeant. "He would never abide such disorder," she murmured, her voice trembling like the flame of the single candle she carried. Deeper inspection revealed horrors in the fireplace, a heap of partially burned letters, their edges charred black, the air thick with the scent of scorched vellum. Officers gingerly extracted fragments with tongs, piecing together puzzles under the dim light. One scrap, addressed to Hartley Inelegant. Script, bore a damning line, "They know about the shipment from March. Someone kept records." The rest dissolved into ash, but the implication hung heavy, a secret alliance exposed, a sin of greed and exploitation laid bare. Eleanor professed ignorance of any shipment, her confusion genuine, but she confessed her husband's recent torment, withdrawn since early October, pacing the moonlit veranda, staring into the fog-shrouded streets as if expecting phantoms. "He'd wake screaming from dreams," she whispered, muttering about waves and lost souls. Biblical visions, perhaps, of Jonah swallowed by the sea for fleeing God's command, or the drowned Egyptians in Exodus, punishment for enslaving the innocent. At Thomas Brennan's more modest but ambitiously furnished home near the Battery, where sea breezes carried the cries of gulls like lamentations, his wife Catherine greeted the officers with tear-streaked cheeks, her shawl clutched tight against the chill. In his study, amid innovations sketched on drafting tables, diagrams of cotton gins that maximized output at the cost of human endurance, they found a locked desk drawer burst open from within, splinters jutting like accusing fingers, the lock shattered outward. Empty. Catherine insisted Brennan alone held the key, his privacy sacrosanct. He'd never force his own lock, she said, her voice breaking. When had it happened? She couldn't say, the study untouched since yesterday. Under the mattress in their bedroom, amid linen scented with lavender to mask the underlying dread, lay a loaded pistol, its barrel cold and oiled, and a hand-drawn map of Charleston Harbor. Ink lines traced waterways, annotated with dates, March 14 at a secluded cove, April 3 near Sullivan's Island, June 22 off the coast, August 15 in deeper channels. No legends, no explanations, but the dates pulse like wounds, hinting at clandestine rendezvous, perhaps with vessels bearing illicit burdens. Brennan, the bold innovator, had courted damnation for profit, echoing the rich man in Luke 16, whose wealth blinded him to the beggar at his gate, only to face torment in the afterlife. Richard Ashby's estate, perched on a rise overlooking rice fields that gleamed like flooded graves under the rising sun, welcomed officers with his wife Margaret's composed demeanor, though her knuckles whitened on her fan. His study was a temple to order, shelves of leather-bound journals chronicling every transaction, every life bought and sold. 37 volumes, arrayed like sentinels, except one absent, the March to September 1844 tome vanished like a ghost. Margaret confirmed it instantly, she'd seen him scribbling in it days prior. He never moved them, she said firmly, her eyes scanning the empty slot as if expecting it to reappear. A housewide search yielded nothing, but tucked into an 1843 journal was a loose page in Ashby's precise hand, 47 names, each an enslaved soul not from his lands, marked sold or gone, dated March 18. A ledger of trafficking, perhaps, a catalogue of sins against humanity, reminiscent of the Book of Revelation's scroll of judgments, where every deed is recorded for the final accounting. Ashby's meticulous nature had become his curse, documenting damnation that now haunted his absence. William Foster's home on Church Street, shadowed by the spire of his family church, found his wife Julia pale and prayerful, a rosary beads clicking in her fingers like ticking time. She spoke of his months-long struggle, nights spent writing by candlelight that pooled wax like tears on his desk. His private journal lay open there, unlocked, a rarity, its last entry from October 22, "I can no longer remain silent. What we have done, what we have all done, demands an answer. The others believe we can bury this like we've buried everything else. But some things won't stay buried. Tomorrow we need to discuss terms. I intend to tell them I'm going to the authorities. God forgive me for waiting this long." Earlier pages dripped with guilt, references to the agreement, the arrangement, what happened in March. Faces haunted his dreams, he wrote, apparitions of the wronged, much like the ghosts that tormented King Saul and Samuel, or the blood of Abel crying from the ground in Genesis. Foster, the progressive among them, had glimpsed redemption's path but too late, his soul weighed by the chains he perpetuated. Marcus Landry's plantation house, isolated on its bluff amid whispering marshes where fireflies danced like lost souls, was the most unnerving. His staff, a mix of enslaved and hired hands, reported his paranoia, extra guards patrolling under torchlight, their footsteps crunching gravel like bones, Landry barricading himself in his bedroom, muttering about shadows closing in. The sealed letter to his sister vanished, as if spirited away by unseen forces. In his chamber, officers recoiled at scratch marks gouging the door's interior, deep and frantic, wood fibers fresh and splintered, as if claws had raked in desperation. Yet the door swung freely, unlocked. Why claw at freedom? A symbol of inner torment, perhaps, like the possessed in Mark 5, tearing at chains in futile rage. On his bedside table, a Bible splayed to Revelation 20, verse 13 underlined viciously, ink-tearing paper, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. A prophecy of resurrection and judgment, fitting for a man teetering on the edge of revelation. Back at the club, Rutherford pieced the mosaic, a shared secret from March 1844, binding them in sin, now unraveling like a frayed rope. He clung to rationality, no vanishings into thin air, but doubts crept in like fog. Architectural plans confirmed no hidden escapes, witnesses verified voices post-locking, the smoldering cigar mocked physics, suggesting a presence lingering beyond departure. Then, on October 25, Harbor Master George Whitfield arrived, his coat reeking of tar and brine, his face lined like weathered sails. In Rutherford's makeshift office, amid stacks of reports, he revealed the thread. The five had queried docs about the Meridian, a ship docking March 13, departing 16, official cargo, cotton, tobacco. Rumors, illicit slaves from West Africa via Caribbean, smuggled despite bans. The international trade outlawed since 1808, but greed persisted, a sin against Amos 8 verses 4-6, oppressing the poor for silver. The Meridian sat low, heavy with unspoken cargo, left abruptly at night. Investors? The vanished five, funding for forbidden gains. But catastrophe struck, arrived near empty, fortune lost. Crew, 14 out, 6 back. Captain vanished post-payment, ship never returned. Rutherford delved into records, Meridian from Baltimore, Shell Company. Crew tracked, 3 in Charleston, defiant. 1 raged, the sea took its due. Evoking Jonah's storm or Pharaoh's drowned army. Others prayed, fled questioning. Log, sparse, concealing horrors. The puzzle darkened, a botched smuggling, lives lost at sea, guilt festering. Had the men convened to silence exposure? Or did divine retribution claim them, as in Psalm 107 verses 23-30, where God commands storms to humble the proud? The tally marks, perhaps souls lost overboard. The scratched numbers, cargo counts? The vanishing, a spiritual erasure, sins swallowed by the abyss. As Rutherford stared at the harbor, waves lapping like accusations, Charleston held its breath. The legacy haunted, justice delayed, but inevitable, a chilling reminder that no empire built on blood endures forever. As November's chill winds swept through Charleston's narrow streets, carrying the scent of salt and decay from the harbor, Constable Daniel Rutherford found himself ensnared in a web that transcended mere crime, a tapestry woven from human avarice, spiritual torment, and the inexorable pull of divine justice. The city, with its grand antebellum facades glowing under gas lamps that flickered like uneasy consciences, hummed with whispers of the vanished five: Hartley, Brennan, Ashby, Foster, and Landry. Church pulpits thundered with sermons on Psalm 69 verse 22, let their table become a snare before them, and that which should have been for their welfare, let it become a trap, drawing parallels to the carved reckoning on the mahogany table, where tally marks numbered 147, each a silent accusation, a soul's imprint on wood like the marks of Cain. The air grew thick with foreboding, as if the veil between worlds thinned, allowing the oppressed to reach back from watery graves. Rutherford, his office cluttered with maps of the harbor's treacherous currents and stacks of yellowed manifests, pored over the Meridian's scant records. The captain, Samuel Garrett, a ghost in ink, his name appearing nowhere else in maritime annals, had vanished as utterly as the planters, his fate a blank page in the ledger of the living. The ship's arrival on March 13 marked the genesis of doom, with pivotal horrors unfolding between the 14th and 18th, dates etched in the men's artifacts like prophetic warnings. Those days, Rutherford surmised, birthed the fear that gnawed at their souls, a spiritual corrosion mirroring the rot of their illicit venture. On October 28, 5 days after the Wellington Club's enigma unfolded, a hesitant figure darkened Rutherford's doorway, Benjamin Cole, a customs clerk whose sallow face glistened with sweat despite the autumn crispness outside. His hands trembled as he clutched his hat, the fabric worn from nervous twisting, his eyes darting like a man pursued by shadows. Seated in the dimly lit office, where a single lantern cast elongated silhouettes on walls papered with wanted posters, Cole confessed his burden. "I've wrestled with this, Constable," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry timber. "Feared for my job, my family, or worse." He spoke of the Meridian's paperwork, bypassed through sensitive channels, euphemisms for corruption in a port where laws bent like reeds in the tide. On March 15, Richard Ashby had approached him privately, not at the bustling main desk amid the clamor of sailors and merchants, but in a secluded alcove redolent of ink and sealing wax. Ashby's eyes, usually sharp with calculation, held a wild glint, his gaze flicking over his shoulder as if expecting ethereal pursuers. He pressed $200 into Cole's palm, silver coins heavy with sin, equivalent to months of honest toil, and demanded expedited clearance, no inspections, swift departure. "Every hour in port is dangerous," Ashby had hissed, his breath hot and ragged, evoking the urgency of a man fleeing hell's hounds. Cole, tempted by the weight of gold that promised relief from his meager existence, complied, but Ashby left more, a sealed envelope, yellowed parchment secured with his personal wax seal, imprinted with the same anchor and cotton motif that haunted the invitations. "If anything befalls me," Ashby instructed, his voice a gravelly plea, "open it. It holds truths that must see light." Cole had hidden it beneath floorboards in his modest home, where the scent of his wife's baking bread mingled with the musty odor of secrecy. Upon hearing of the vanishings, dread compelled him forward. Rutherford, his fingers steady despite the pounding in his chest, broke the seal with a knife's edge, the wax cracking like brittle bone. The letter unfolded, Ashby's script elegant yet hurried. Ink blots like tears staining the page. As Rutherford read, the room seemed to dim, the lantern's flame guttering as if disturbed by unseen breaths. His face hardened, lines deepening like furrows in plowed earth, a second and third reading confirming the horror. The confession was a soul-bearing litany, a modern echo of David's lament in Psalm 51, "Against thee, the only, have I sinned, and done this evil in thy sight." Ashby detailed the pact. In January 1844, the five, partly with his military precision, Brennan's ambitious fire, Foster's conflicted legacy, Landry's naive greed, and Ashby's own meticulous hand, pulled fortunes to finance the forbidden. The international slave trade, outlawed since 1808, beckoned with promises of untapped profit, circumventing laws through shadowed networks. They chartered the Meridian, a vessel of sturdy oak and canvas sails, captained by Garrett, a man whose eyes held the void of the Atlantic. Departing December 1843 with 14 crew, it sailed to West Africa's fevered coasts, intent on procuring cargo, 147 human lives, souls torn from homelands, bound for Charleston's auctions. But the return on March 13 brought catastrophe, empty holds, 8 crew lost, survivors hollow-eyed wraiths. Garrett muttered of a storm, waves towering like God's wrath, flooding the bowels where captives languished in darkness, chains clanking amid screams drowned by thunder. Yet his gaze betrayed deeper terrors, perhaps mutiny born of conscience or supernatural uprising, like the Israelites' deliverance in Exodus, where the sea swallowed oppressors. They paid the remnants anyway, silver silencing tongues, the ship slipping into night like a specter. Financial ruin paled against exposure's threat, but reprieve proved illusory. Anonymous torments ensued, letters detailing voyage horrors only insiders knew, carvings on estate trees spelling accusations, whispers in crowded markets from faceless voices, "Someone knows what we did." Worse, apparitions, figures at property edges, moonlit silhouettes with faces of the drowned, eyes accusatory, vanishing like mist when approached. Ashby wrote of guilt's vice, sleepless nights haunted by visions, a collective damnation mirroring Job's afflictions, where earthly wealth crumbles under divine scrutiny. "I seek no forgiveness," he concluded, "only that truth prevail." Probe the Meridian, March 1844. Our deeds demand reckoning. Dated October 20, 3 days before oblivion claimed him. Rutherford dismissed Cole with stern warnings, the envelope's weight anchoring him to his desk as twilight bled through grimy windows. Patterns crystallized, a botched smuggling, 147 perished, matching the table's tallies, 8 crew vanished, investors plagued by vengeful echoes. The reckoning carved with urgency suggested orchestration, but the locked room defied mechanics. Who engineered this? A survivor's kin? Or something ethereal, justice from the deep as in Revelation 20 verse 13, the sea yielding its dead for judgment? The investigation surged like a tide, officers fanning through docks where fishmongers hawked catches amid gull cries, questioning stevedores whose calloused hands unloaded secrets. Plantation interviews revealed paranoia, extra guards pacing torchlit perimeters, whips cracking harsher, as if fear inverted upon the enslaved. Strangers prowled grounds, melting into shadows like biblical angels of death. Ruth, from Hartley's Fields, recounted October 22 ND's midnight chorus, voices rising from beyond the big house, melodies in unfamiliar African tongues, harmonious yet mournful, lasting till pre-dawn. Like souls calling home, she whispered, her eyes distant, evoking the songs of Miriam after the Red Sea's parting. Others corroborated, ethereal singing across all 5 estates, building tension like a gathering storm, winds whispering indictments through palmettos. Families yielded more, Eleanor's tale of Hartley's lock obsession, nailing windows, pistol bedside, terror etching his warrior's face. Catherine spoke of Brennan's aborted flight to England, murmuring, "It will follow anywhere, what it?" Julia recalled Foster's journal agonies, prayers for absolution amid candlelit vigils. Margaret noted Ashby's vanished ledger, pages perhaps chronicling the damned voyage. Landry's staff described his barricades, the clawed door a metaphor for inner demons clawing free. Then, October 15 TH's packages, identical, anonymous, filled with beach sand gritty under fingers, mingled with serrated wood and bone shards human, confirmed by a grim-faced examiner, fragments pale as guilt. A message from the abyss, the sea's remnants returned, like Jonah's spat from the whale, demanding confrontation. Rutherford, rationalist soul-straining, consulted fringes, mystics in shadowed alleys, root workers brewing potions amid herb scents. Charlatans abounded, but Adeline, an elder revered in freed communities, her hut flickering with tallow candles, offered chills. "Water don't forget, constable," she intoned, her voice gravelly as surf, eyes gleaming like polished obsidian. "What you cast in comes back, swollen with wrath. The denied walk shores, seeking dew." Echoes of Ecclesiastes 3 verse 15, God requireth that which is past, unsettling his empiricism. November 8 brought climax, a fishing crew, nets heavy with the day's haul, spotted a wreck on a sandbar a mile offshore, dawn's light revealing a hull breached like a wounded beast. Word raced to Rutherford, the Meridian, name faint on barnacle-crusted wood. He mustered a team, 3 officers, Carpenter Thomas Gray boarding a skiff through choppy waves that slapped hulls like reprimands. The approach reeked, rot's miasma, death's bouquet blended with brine, gagging even hardened men. The ship loomed, masts splintered like broken crosses, rigging a tangled web, hull cracked, taking water yet snagged on sand. Boarding, boots squelching on softened decks, lanterns pierced gloom. Cargo crates splintered empty, barrels staved, sediment layering like grave soil, no bodies, but absence screamed. Descent to the hold, stairs creaking underfoot, air thickening to a fetid soup. This abyss, designed for human cargo, chained in squalor, lightless torment, now revealed its curse. Chains everywhere, rusted links coiled like serpents, manacles dangling from beams, floors strewn with irons that once bit flesh. Hundreds, forged for 147, now silent witnesses to atrocity. Gray whispered, "No storm did this alone," his hammer tapping hollow echoes. Rutherford felt spiritual weight, as if souls lingered, chains rattling faintly in breeze, perhaps imagination, or the dead's lament. The Meridian's return sealed the parable, greed's vessel, adrift in judgment's sea, beached as evidence. No crew, no answers, but symbolism profound, a Jonah's whale regurgitating proof, demanding the city's soul-searching. As fog enveloped the wreck, Rutherford pondered, human vengeance or divine? The haunting legacy endured, a chill reminder that sins against humanity summon reckonings from depths unknown. In the shadowed bowels of the Meridian, as Constable Daniel Rutherford's lantern pierced the fetid gloom, the air thickened with the stench of eternal decay, a briny rot that clawed at the throat, mingled with the metallic tang of rusted iron and the faint, ghostly whisper of waves lapping against timber. The hold, a cavernous void designed for the barbaric transport of human cargo, stretched before them like the maw of Leviathan, its wooden beams groaning under the weight of unspeakable history. Chains dangled from hooks bolted into the walls, coils snaking across the sodden floor like serpents from the Garden of Eden, symbols of man's original sin amplified in the Antebellum South. Not mere restraints, but 147 sets of shackles, each pair forged in fire, locked with keys long lost to the deep, arranged in grim patterns, rose for the chained, the oppressed packed shoulder to shoulder in darkness, their breaths a collective prayer for deliverance. Yet now, every manacle hung empty, latches engaged from the outside, unbreached, unbroken. Carpenter Thomas Gray knelt, his calloused fingers tracing the cold metal, his face paling in the flickering light. "These weren't forced," he murmured, voice echoing like a judgment in an empty cathedral. "No picks, no breaks. Locked as intended, but the souls they held? Vanished, as if the Almighty himself turned the key. How do the bound escape without trace? How do 147 rise as one, defying iron and ocean?" It evoked the miracle of Peter's release in Acts 12, where an angel struck off chains in the night, a divine intervention against tyrants. But here, the symbolism chilled deeper, perhaps not salvation for the captives, but retribution, the sea as God's instrument, swallowing sin as in the days of Noah. Scratched into the hold's walls were inscriptions, a chaotic tapestry of desperation carved with nails or shards, words in tongues of the African diaspora, Yoruba pleas for ancestors, Wolof curses against captors, fragments of hymns twisted by suffering. Rutherford, his boots squelching in pooled seawater that seemed to rise unnaturally, traced one English phrase gouged deep into a support beam. The water answered. Answered what? The cries of the enslaved? The hubris of their would-be masters? It resonated with Jonah 2 verse 3, "For thou hadst cast me into the deep, in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about." A prophet's lament turned vengeful echo, the ocean responding to iniquity with fury. Ascending from the hold's abyss, the team scoured the ship's upper realms, the deck slick underfoot, splintered planks creaking like bones under strain. In the captain's cabin, amid charts yellowed by salt and despair, lay the true log, a weathered tome bound in leather cracked like parched earth, its pages warped but legible. The final entry, dated March 14, 1844, spilled forth in Captain Garrett's trembling script, "Third day from harbor. Storm assaulted us at dusk, fiercer than any in my 30 years. Waves crashed like divine hammers, flooding the hold before we could batten. Water surged, hungry, as if the Atlantic craved atonement. We forced the hatch empty. 147 gone, chains intact, locked. No bodies amid the brine. Crew mutters of curses, the sea exacting toll for our abomination. Nonsense, yet inexplicable. Lost Johnson, Peters, Mackenzie, Walsh, Davis, Montgomery, Pike, Reed overboard, presumed. But Matthews vows he saw Johnson in the hold this morn, waist deep in flood, staring vacant. Called, no reply. Sank beneath, vanished. I scorn specters, but this vessel reeks of wrongness. The log ceased abruptly, a void mirroring the men's fates, the ship adrift in spiritual limbo, returning to Charleston with broken survivors before vanishing into mists, only to resurface now, a rotting husk spat back by the deep as evidence of cosmic balance. Every crevice yielded relics, crew quarters strewn with sodden garments, rusted tools, crucifixes clutched in final prayers. All encrusted in sediment like grave offerings. But in a locker near the captain's berth, sealed in oilcloth against the elements, 5 leather pouches gleamed gold coins heavy with blood money, the hush payment from the investors. Each bore a carved name: Hartley, Brennan, Ashby, Foster, Landry. The bribes returned, untarnished, as if rejected by the underworld, echoing Matthew 6 verse 19, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt," a divine rebuke to their ill-gotten silence. Rutherford emerged onto the deck as twilight bled across the harbor, the sun dipping like a judgment flame, casting long shadows that danced on waves lapping hungrily at the hull. The Meridian seemed to sigh, settling deeper into the sandbar, as if eager to reclaim its secrets. Pieces aligned, 5 men, blinded by greed, funded a voyage defying God's law and man's, trafficking souls in defiance of bans. 147 perished, drowned, yet bodiless, their essence perhaps unbound by miracle or malediction. Crew paid for quiet, but hauntings ensued, driving the guilty to that locked chamber. No earthly exit explained their erasure, but aboard this death barge, Rutherford glimpsed transcendence. Crimes so profound demand reckonings beyond statutes, as in Romans 12 verse 19, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Towed to the naval yard under guard, the Meridian was moored amid ironclad vessels, its timbers groaning in protest. Rutherford's report, inked by candlelight in his office where harbor winds rattled shutters, detailed the web, illegal venture, catastrophic loss, spectral pursuits culminating in impossibility. Classified unsolved, yet linked indelibly to 147 deaths, it rippled through society like a plague from Exodus.
Shockwaves fractured Charleston's elite, families in morning gowns demanded probes, lawsuits loomed like storm clouds, private sleuths combed alleys.
Widows Eleanor Hartley clutching her husband's watch, Catherine Brennan fingering the map's edges, faced ruin, Meridian investments evaporated, claims dissolving against phantom companies.
Courts, in marble halls echoing with gavels like thunder, deemed no recourse, leaving estates fractured, plantations auctioned under auctioneer's chance.
Yet in shadowed quarters, among the enslaved, tales bloomed like night jasmine, whispers of divine equity, masters swallowed by their sins, fulfilling Amos 5 verse 24, but let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Variations wove through cabins, the 147 rising as avengers, chains turned ethereal weapons. In December 1844, the Meridian defied moorings, no gale, no breach, sinking overnight, vanishing into mud as if pulled by unseen hands. Salvage failed, cables snapping like frail faith, leaving it entombed, a submerged sepulchre for unnamed victims, their legacy etched in silt. Winter dragged, searches fruitless, no bodies, no sightings, erasure complete. Benjamin Cole drowned February 1845 in dock shallows, verdict accident, yet whispers hinted silencing or suicidal guilt, his envelopes truths too burdensome.
Meridian survivors fled, identity shed like snakeskin, lost to distant ports.
But in 1852 Boston, William Thatcher, once a crewman, gasped a confession on death's bed to a priest, pneumonia ravaging like the storm.
He recounted the tempest, holds vanishing, then unreported terrors, nightly dreams of chaining, water rising, waking choking on phantom brine. Bunks soaked sands rain, clear skies mocking.
They lingered, he rasped, the 147, in timbers, in waves, watching, waiting for justice. The priest's record reached Charleston, but years' dull pursuit, Rutherford retired, case frosted over. Families endured, remarriages in hushed chapels, heirs inheriting shadows, plantations passed like cursed heirlooms. Time layered oblivion, yet legend persisted, the Wellington vanishing, dissected in academies, revived in gazettes, unyielding. Spring 1846 brought Frederick Bailey, later Douglas, traversing south, forging underground railroad links. In Charleston's undercurrents, he gleaned tales from the oppressed, pre-vanishing songs in ancestral tongues, nocturnal figures dissolving like mist. Eliza, Hartley's kitchen hand, found dawn struck at estate's edge, weeping joyfully, they returned.
Found their due.
Peace radiated from her, burden lifted, evoking Isaiah 61 verse 1 to proclaim liberty to the captives. Douglas noted privately, later alluding in autobiography to masters devoured by transgressions, details veiled against peril, slavery's grip ironclad. The October 23 enigma endures, 5 entered, locked in, gone, effects abandoned, cigar smoldering like incense to wrathful gods. No sleight explained it, room sealed eternal, table preserved till 1886's blaze consumed it.
Yet spiritually, it resonates, debts unpaid summon forces transcending locks, as in Ecclesiastes 8 verse 11, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Justice, deferred, manifests inexorably.
Harbor lore whispers, foggy eaves, subaqueous lights near the wreck, ghostly gleams dancing below, nets snagged on chains. Fishermen shun it, harvests barren or haunted. Stand at Charleston's battery tonight, waves murmuring secrets, the same tide that bore suffering vessels. Water holds memory, cradling 147 unnamed, lives commodified, deaths dismissed as loss. The Meridian slumbers beneath, monument to indelible stains.
Reminder that reckonings pierce privilege's veil.
5 vanished, unfound, fitting epitaph for souls who traded humanity for gold. Perhaps in divine ledger, balance restored, the oppressed exalted, oppressors humbled, an eternal parable chilling Charleston's soul.